then you shouldn't be afraid to ride the snake.
Ride the snake.
Know what you're dressed up as. We were talking earlier today about costumes, and Sweet Travis was going to wear one that would have won the day, but he chickened out a little bit. I think he chickened out. It was going to be fantastic. He would have had to get some face paint, and that's fine. That's fine, and we encourage that. But ultimately, he didn't do it, decided that was not what's best for his career moving forward. DC, you have been active on Twitter, disguised as someone else. So it seems like your thoughts are maybe a little bit more risk-taking than Travis was interested in. How's your Halloween? Are you giving out any candy? Are you expecting candy? Are you going trick-or-treating? What's the plan?
Yeah, the booger avatar on Twitter works. I don't know. I don't think I'm allowed to, look like booger in person out in public. So, yeah, we'll leave that there. No, I'm not going trick or treating. I do have though my DC 15 coupon codes printed out for any children that happen to knock on my door this evening. Get them started early, get them in the RPS store, give them that 15% off their first weekly or monthly payment with code DC15. So I've got those ready. Saved me some money going candy shopping. I can put those into some entries tonight, and hopefully a good Halloween here.
First of all, it's never too early to get started on the degenerate lifestyle. So I really am impressed with that approach. And then you're bringing me back to the coupon codes. The coupon codes. I mean, I was winning for a while, and then Bobby hired surrogates. I mean, he was paying people to tweet out his code. He really wanted that steak dinner. The parents of newborns, they don't get out of the house a lot. And he went to town and he took it. Good for him. Good for him, Travis. Are you trick-or-treating? Are you giving out candy? Some people in here are muting the channel because they're afraid of the snake. Don't be afraid of the snake. Don't be afraid of the snake, Travis. Are you giving out any snake tonight?
Some might say I'm not allowed to, right? As our friend Chris Hansen would say, right? But no, I'm not.
Depends on who you want to give it to. I mean,
yeah,
that is true. But I'm watching the Jets tonight, man. That's going to be a blast, right? Getting to watch Aaron Rodgers in prime time. Who can't be more excited about
that? It's misery. It's misery. In fact, I can't think of anything more miserable than having to watch the Jets. Not even the Browns now, because I'm kind of interested in watching Jameis Winston play football. He looked pretty good. Defeated the Ravens. Sorry, Snyder. Sorry to the Wish Carrot Syndicate group. They were heavy on the Ravens last week. Didn't work out for them, but I can't think of anything worse than all of these Jets games in prime time, except Travis. And even that's changed now with the Steelers. It's like they're okay to watch. This team's a train wreck.
Yeah, it's definitely a mess. But we got basketball tonight too, which starts at 8, random time to see 8 o'clock on Thursday with the 4-gamer. And of course, what wouldn't be Halloween without some treats from our old guy, Greg Popovich? I know you're a big fan. Curious if it'll be a trick or treat for you tonight, JT, with our boy Greg.
Well, I mean, you talk about Greg Popovich. I was actually thinking about him. Because I'm staying in Manhattan, and there's a guy who gets in the elevator, and he wasn't tall enough to be Greg Popovich, but he bore a resemblance to him. And I kind of looked at him, and I was immediately filled with this anger, and it just gave some thought to being violent. And then it passed, and that's fine because that's what you do when you grow up. But speaking of which, we've got Greg Popovich and the Spurs on the slate tonight. We have the Jazz in the same game. That's a coach that suffers from the same coaching school as Popovich. In fact, he was Popovich trained, and we'll get to it when we talk about the games, but a 60% owned projected Jeremy Sochan. So I'm sure that is probably going to work out really well for anyone who plays him. He may be a good play. He's been good. We'll get to that. But you guys know, and we talked about this last Thursday, DC. We talked about this last Thursday because the Spurs were on the slate. The Spurs were popular. You wanted to play Wembanyama. It was a good play at the ownership, but he's just not unleashing these guys. So we're seeing that with the expensive Spurs, they have to be really efficient in the time that they're allotted. But we'll get into all that. If you guys go ahead, and if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. It is a 4-game slate, as Travis has mentioned. The first game, Travis, the Bucks head into Memphis. They're playing the Grizzlies, 6.5-point favorites. This total has gone up steadily. It started at 225. It's now at 232.5. Travis, what are your thoughts here on the Bucks and the Grizzlies? John Morant looks to be in this game.
Yeah, we look to have most of the guys back, so that's at least good. With this Grizzlies team, and I know they are missing guys, so that's the one. What? Oh, I must have cut out, but can you hear me now?
Sort of.
Okay, cool. My Wi-Fi must be acting up, but we are missing guys from this game, right? We have John Conchar, who is questionable. We have Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart. They are both out, so it's clearly going to be a spot to consider these options. And I mean, John Conchar, the big thing with him being questionable, I think this opens up a really nice role for Jalen Wells. And Jalen Wells hasn't had a bad role already to start this season. So at 3.9K, I think he's a really intriguing value on that side of the ball. Obviously, you're not going to see too much of like Santi Aldama at the 3, you would assume, right? But Jake LaRavia, I think, could slide over there. So that's why I'm saying Wells, I think, is in a really good spot. And Jaw's a good spend up if you want at 9K. We've also seen Scottie Pippen Jr. We've seen him just go out there and look like Scottie Pippen for most of the season. Sure, he struggled in the last game against Brooklyn, but he's had a great start to the year. And at 5.8K, he has to be in playing tournaments. The spot where I'm struggling is more that front court, right? Spending 7.4K for Jaren Jackson Jr., who can't keep his hands to himself, with Giannis on the other side. Brandon Clark, Zach Edey. Like, this just does not seem like a great spot for this Memphis front court, where I honestly think that we just have to mainly look at the backcourt. So that's kind of my overall thoughts on how I'd be handling this spot with Memphis. Milwaukee's a little bit different. Obviously, Giannis, he's on almost any slate. The studs are always good. They're always in play. As long as you have that construction that you can spend for him, that's fine. The guys I'm struggling with, some of these like the Gary Trent Jr.'s, the Pat Connaughtons, like these guys just seem like they're not great plays in tournament formats. I don't love their ceiling at their price. I think they have really low floors. They can cut into each other's minutes. So I'm just not excited about plays like that. Even like a Taurean Prince, like he doesn't seem like a super exciting play. I know there's no Chris Middleton there, but I still think it's just all around risky. Damian Lillard, or as you like to call him, JT, Damian Lillard.
Because that's his name.
Yes. Mr. Lillard, he's definitely not as good of a play as John Morant, right? John Morant will grade out as a better play. Like, if we pull up SaberSim, let's look at the exact projection, just to see the exact projection difference between these plays and ownership. You actually have I'm surprised. I don't buy it. You have a higher projection on Dame.
Yeah, I don't buy it either. That was the thing I was going to bring up.
Yeah. Saber's going to adjust that. I don't think that's correct. But, yeah, anyways, we'll see. But I think that's completely wrong, and I would project it the other way. I think that's just wrong. So don't buy that at all. But I think Ja is a good play, and I think he's a better play than Damian Lillard. Mr. Lillard is fine. He's always a guy that you can consider in tournaments. And keep in mind, when he's on the court, we want to attack him defensively, right? Like, he's someone that we've attacked all last year. We attacked him when he was in Portland. We attacked him last year when he was with the Bucks with guard. So if Ja's going to play a lot, I'm going to be in on Ja. I think he's a really good spend-up option today.
Certainly, DC, the ceiling for Damian Lillard has been much more sporadic since his move to the Milwaukee Bucks. I think this probably isn't the right slate for him. I believe he's coming off a ceiling game as well. And then just hearing Travis talk about this Memphis rotation, it's another team that is very, very difficult. There's no consistency or limited consistency outside of John Moran. He mentioned Jaren Jackson Jr. Certainly the concern there is always with foul trouble. Indeed, you have Giannis as well as Brook Lopez, two big bodies for him to go up against and get into trouble. What are your thoughts here on the Bucks and the Grizzlies?
Yeah, I mean, I hope what Sabre currently has projected, projection wise and ownership wise holds true because I certainly like John Morant a ton. I assume they'll raise his projection. I'm with Mangone on that one, but at least as of right now, they've got him. They've even got Conchar in right now with the projection. So, if he's out, obviously some of the Memphis guys will go up, but Memphis in a pretty weird spot in terms of just a huge discrepancy between the available bodies in the backcourt and in the front court, right? Missing Smart, missing Bain, two of their most important guys, also missing Luke Kennard, going to be out this game. Vince Williams, I don't think he's played yet this season, but he's out. And then, you go over to the front court, the big men, and they've got like 6 guys for 2 spots, right? Power forward, they've got Jackson, Aldama, LaRavia, and then at center, they've got Clark, Zach Edey, and Jay Huff, who are all going to play. I mean, I think Jaren Jackson is the guy who, if he's playing well, could get, the 35 minutes anyway. And sure, it could happen for these other guys, but I really, outside of Jackson, I don't have much interest in playing Clark or Edey or Huff. I think LaRavia is more interesting. I think what Memphis is really going to be missing tonight is shooting. They just don't have. I mean, even John Morant's not a sharpshooter. Scottie Pippen, the backup point guard, not really a guy who chucks it from deep a lot. So kind of an unbalanced team and has me off of the Memphis front court for the most part. But the backcourt I like a lot. Morant, one of my favorite plays on this slate. I like Pippen too as a tournament play, mostly on teams that don't have Morant. So far, at least, pretty limited minutes where Pippen and Morant have been on the floor together. I do think they will be on the floor together more tonight than they have been in the past because, they've had Desmond Bain and Marcus Smart playing in these first few games. That won't be the case tonight. So I do like those guys. If Kennard misses, or Conchar rather, Kennard already out. If Conchar misses, then definitely in on Pippen and especially in on Jalen Wells, who I'll be honest, I don't know that much about Jalen Wells, but he's getting consistent minutes so far, producing decently well, 3,900. I think he would have to be in play if Conchar is out. I just don't see a way for them to get away from playing him, frankly, probably 30-plus minutes. I think he's okay, too, if Conchar is in there. And if Conchar is in, I think he himself, Conchar, is a pretty good play. LaRavia, my favorite of the bigs, if we're going cheaper there at 4,600. And then, yeah, John Morant, I mean, the matchup too, right? Like, you got to think he's going to have to try to carry this team tonight. Matchup with Lillard and the Milwaukee backcourt is good. So very in on Morant. Milwaukee side, it's mostly Giannis that I'm interested in. Obviously, assuming he plays, is probable to play. Off to a solid start on the year. And, I think the matchup pretty good with the Memphis Bigs, who are obviously going to rotate those guys in and out. I expect Giannis to be able to win against who's ever out there for Memphis in the front court. So mostly the studs in this game and then the value pieces on Memphis I think are pretty good, depending on, of course, if Conchar plays or not.
And it is the first game of the night, so we will have that news. Chris Henderson is here. He's attacking me, and I'm not sure about what. Every name I said was fine. Manny, we'll talk about this when we get to that Spurs game. Spurs game is at 9:00 Eastern. Nothing more exciting than a Spurs slate, other than Spurs slate when they're on a back-to-back. DB made stinkies in his pants. Watch your diet there. Chris Henderson does want to know if you could play Pippen and Morant. I guess you could. Seems a little thin to me with some of the other players on the slate. Andre Jackson is probably a guy that's not going to be in my player pool. Just first glance, what are you thinking about Andre Jackson? Any thoughts there on him? No, boys have no thoughts on Andre Jackson, so sounds like no. All right.
I'm not an Andre Jackson guy, JT, unless he's like guaranteed starter and you feel confident in his minutes. But sometimes he starts and it's like a spot start and it's not ideal. So I am not a big. I'm not a big Andre Jackson.
I'm not playing Andre Jackson, barring something's gone terribly wrong if Andre Jackson ends up in the line.
Yeah.
No promises for sure, but I'm not planning on it.
No. All right. We'll move on to the next game. Houston playing in Dallas. Mark Cuban's Mavericks. That guy's kind of a little nutty. Mavs favored by 6.5, 226.5 total here. GC, we'll stick with you. Interesting spot here with both a lot of the production on the Mavericks side, as was the case last year, coming from Luka and Kyrie Irving. You have the split at center. And then on the Rockets side, hasn't really come together yet for them. What are your thoughts here on this game?
Yeah, nice start for Dallas, 3-1 to start the season. They look pretty good. Even Kyrie seems like he's got a little extra gear early on, coming off a huge game against the Wolves, but really 2 games in a row. He was awesome against Utah too. They have had a nice schedule, Dallas has, to start the year for the most part. But yeah, Kyrie, 7,500 looks good. Of course, you can play Luka at 11-2. I think I prefer Giannis to Luka tonight, but it's certainly close between the two. And I have no problem if people want to go to Luka there. Slightly in Giannis for me. Klay Thompson, we did see him come back to earth in a big way against the Wolves, but I still think he's going to get, 10-plus three-point attempts most nights, and we obviously know how he can shoot. I do think there's more upside to Klay Thompson than maybe the general public is giving credit, just with how that team operates with Kyrie and Luka. Thompson's going to get a ton of open threes, and he obviously, even, in the twilight of his career a little bit, he can still shoot the lights out on any given night. So I think Thompson is interesting. And then the value for Dallas looks good to me too. PJ Washington, again, maybe not the most exciting fantasy player in the world, but he's playing big minutes. He's been 32-plus minutes in each of the last 3, shooting a lot of threes. And, even though they haven't gone in very much so far, shooting just 27% on the year, he's still averaging, almost 30 fantasy points per game on 31 minutes per game. So contributing in other areas. I like the matchup for him against Houston. And I don't really see the minutes going away from Washington. So I think he's one of the better values on this slate, frankly, at that $4,800 price tag. Not sure what the ownership is going to look like on him, but he's certainly a guy that I'm considering in my main lineups. And then another guy who I think is going overlooked a little bit just because, I don't know, maybe it's just because he's coming off the bench, but Derek Lively, you're probably not going to get 30-plus minutes out of him, but he's a really, really good player. Came on strong at the end of last year in the playoffs, obviously was a rookie last year. And, I think he's just going to continue to improve, can fill up the box score in multiple areas. 5,100 against Houston is too cheap for Lively for me. And I like these guys that, at least for tournaments, that have, kind of a lower minutes projection. I'm not saying it's inaccurate, but to me, those are the guys that you can kind of hit the correlation with them, where if they're playing well, more minutes are probably going to come, right? I kind of think that's the case for the Dallas Mavericks. Big guys, Lively and Gafford in general. I certainly prefer Lively between the two, but Gafford I think is a fine play at 4,500 as well. So I do like the Dallas side of this game quite a bit, definitely more than the Houston side. Again, Van Vliet, Jalen Green, and Sengun, I think, are all fine plays. Jabari Smith, too. Again, those guys are all reasonable ways to go on this slate, but I certainly prefer the Dallas side of this one, led by 2 of the bigs, Lively and Washington, and then probably would stick to just one of Luka, Kyrie, or Thompson. I don't think I want to get multiple of those guys in the same lineup, but all 3 guys I think are reasonable plays. Kyrie, probably my favorite of the bunch.
Travis, on a 4-game slate, you're a little bit more, I think, willing to take a chance on a split such as the one with Lively and Gafford. And then DC mentioned Klay Thompson. Starts off the season pretty good here. And look, the Minnesota Timberwolves over the last couple of years have ended quite a few hot streaks. So it's not like that's the end of the world to perform poorly against that team. They've got a history of containing Luka as well. Sorry, Glock. Travis, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, our guy Glock, we know he's a big Dallas fan. I know Luka was banged up the other day and he wanted to tank for Cooper, but no, there's no need to do that. Luka's fine, Dallas is fine, and I think they're good plays here in this spot, and ones that you should definitely be looking at. Now, when we play 4-game slates, and this happens a lot on Tuesdays and Thursdays, like the stars are just out, right? They TNT games, they're not putting the Pistons on TNT. Charles Barkley, he doesn't watch those teams. He doesn't watch the Bulls. He watches the Dallas Mavericks. He watches the teams that actually have real players. Wembanyama. I think Luka is a great play if you have the salary relief. We talked about some salary relief plays already in the Memphis side, so we can get him in there if we want to. That's just the big debate. Do we have the salary relief? And I think we'll have enough to be able to make that work. I also think Kyrie is mispriced at 7.5K.
Yeah.
I've been saying it every single show I've been on. Like, just play Kyrie right now. That price, it's just too cheap. He's a good play. I honestly think you could get away with playing Luka and Kyrie on the same team, as crazy as that sounds. I'm not saying, it's a must, but I just think the price tag of Kyrie, and if Luka's the top scoring play, you could get away with it for sure on a 4-game slate. So like both these guys, clearly going to be plays that we want to get to. Klay Thompson's an interesting one. I know he's been shooting absolutely lights out. He has upside at the price, but keep in mind, if you do play him, you might want to be careful about how many Mavs you play then, right? Because he's just going to be shooting the lights out of the 3-ball, and they probably pull away a good amount. Maybe you want to have it more of like a game stack or something like that. The Lively Gafford thing can be frustrating when you roster them. If you look at their ownership on SaberSim, Lively is currently around 8%. Gafford is at 17%. The price gap is $600. That makes Lively a way better tournament play than Gafford right now. That's something that every single slate I play when it comes to the Mavericks, I want to look specifically at this team and I want to say, what's the price tag on both these guys? What's the ownership? And then make a decision based on that and get overweight on the one that makes sense. Lively's the one that makes sense to be overweight on in tournaments for $600 more. That's just how I would handle it. If you happen to be even with the field on Gafford, that's fine. I'd rather just get well overweight on Lively instead. And honestly, Lively's the better basketball player. They're going to start Gafford instead. The reason why they start him is because he's definitely solid energizer kind of play. He's good, but if he gets in the foul trouble, it's not a big deal. They'll close with Lively. They're going to close whichever guy's the hot hand. That's how they're going to do it. That's why you want the lower owned guy. So I think those guys are both in play as values. We should talk about Mr. Şengün, as the RPS chat likes to call him. He's been great. The price tag is really good at 8.5K. He's clearly shown a ceiling. I think he's a really good tournament play that you have to have in the mix. I think this is one of the better games on the slate to get exposure to. The problem is there's a lot of spends to do it, right? Like, I'm probably not getting a Dylan Brooks at 4.4K as a value. Maybe I could get to like Atari Easton, but the point I'm getting at is a lot of like the good plays in this game, they're more the spends. Like, for instance, Fred VanVleet at 7K. He's a better play than Jalen Green at 7.7. I actually think that's a pretty good value at his price tag. So I like Fred VanVleet as well. So I think there's a lot of good plays in this game, but they're primarily spends. So I need to find values to make it work in other spots. So that's kind of overall how I'm attacking this game.
All right. The kid has a question, and I don't like it. So we're not going to answer it. If you have another question or a better question, something that would be more appropriate for the program, then we may consider answering that. Otherwise, Travis, we'll move on.
JT, if I wore my Halloween costume, I could have answered it pretty well for you, but good thing I did.
I mean, I'll be honest, we're disappointed that you didn't wear the Halloween costume because this was something that you suggested yesterday you were planning on doing, and then the plans just fell apart.
I don't know. I felt like it was a risky idea. So, sometimes we got to just lay low and find another spot to do it. Maybe we'll do it next Tuesday. Maybe next Tuesday would be a good occasion, JT.
So the next game is the Spurs, as we mentioned, on a back-to-back, playing the Jazz. The Spurs favored by 1, Travis, 221.5 total. AP is in the chat here, and AP says he likes the under in this game, under 221.5. He's been on fire here with the bets. Of course, he may throw some more up before lock. But what are your thoughts here? Spurs on a back-to-back, 60% on Jeremy Sochan. Wembanyama not shown the ceiling yet this season. Minutes have been tough. This is as good a matchup as any his price is down a little bit. But, man, this team on a back-to-back is deadly. What are your thoughts? Travis.
Oh, I thought you said.
Travis is all right. Travis is experiencing technical difficulty. If you live in his neighborhood and he shows up trick-or-treating, hand him internet. DC, what are your thoughts here on the Spurs and the Jazz?
Yeah, I was big on Wembanyama that first game. Disappointed there, and really hasn't. I mean, not that he's been bad, but hasn't quite gotten it going. What's that?
It's not his fault. I mean, he's just not in a system where he's going to get 34 or 35 minutes until maybe January.
Yeah, he did get 35 two games ago against Houston, so a little bit of willingness to extend him there. Hasn't shot well, shooting 40% overall, 19% from three is Wembanyama. You know those numbers are going to come up. Doesn't have a single steal yet, so I think Wembanyama better days are ahead for sure with Wembanyama. I don't mind him here against Utah. I don't mind the matchup at all. I think he's a fine spend. I think it's pretty close on the spend up between Giannis and Luka and Wemby. Problem is value is kind of hard to come by, so probably going to have to limit it to one of those guys. Chris Paul has slowed down the Spurs a little bit. Not ideal for the Utah guys. Tyus Jones, though, missing this game for or Trey Jones, rather, for San Antonio. They still haven't extended Chris Paul's minutes very much. Going to get, it looks like, between 26, 28 minutes a game for CP3. Understandable at this stage of his career. I think he's more in play on FanDuel at 5,400. I don't hate him at 5,900 in this matchup. And then Jeremy Sokan is the guy who looks like he's going to be, as of now, according to SaberSim, maybe the most popular player on this slate. You certainly understand why. Lack of value on a 4-game slate, obviously not that many games to choose from, and just not that many great value plays. Part of it's the slate. Part of it, though, is just the pricing on DraftKings. They've really kind of bumped up the studs, the top guys, and it's rare to have a cheaper player kind of grade out as one of the best point per dollar values on the slate. But that is true, at least projection-wise, on Mr. Sohan, who I don't love it as chalk at 5,800, but the minutes have been there. He's been productive, and there's just not that many places to go for salary savings. So haven't made a decision yet on Sohan. I do right now kind of lean towards eating that chalk and maybe trying to get a little bit different elsewhere. Definitely the best, point per dollar play on the Spurs. It would be CP3 and Wemby next for me. But problem with JT is everybody loves Wemby, right? Nobody wants to be late to this party. So you see him come in pretty high owned on most nights. It's not like we're getting it doesn't look like at least an ownership discount despite relative struggles to start the year. So maybe I'll end up going a different direction there. Utah, to me, it looks like just a bunch of reasonable types of plays. Do we know on MANGONE yet? Looks like he's questionable with the back. Obviously, if he's out, John Collins would become one of the best values on the slate at 5,600. You could look at the other big men too, like Walker Kessler. And then Jordan Clarkson, I think, going mispriced, at least, I would say, at 5,200. Reminds me a little bit of the Derek Lively situation where, the minutes maybe aren't going to be there every night, but the role is good. He can fill it up. And Clarkson at 5,200 on DraftKings looks like one of the better values at the guard position to me on this slate. So, a little bit of a tough game here, but those are my thoughts on that.
The thing about Wembanyama here is, of the guys that are priced over 10K, he's going to be the lowest owned, which I think is interesting. The matchup's interesting. I have concerns about the back-to-back, especially a back-to-back in October. I'm leaning towards projecting Jordan Clarkson as a better play than Sochan, just because the ownership there. There's another guy who's projected to be, at least when I'm looking at, a little bit more highly owned, and I have the same concerns with him. But certainly a highly owned Spur on a 4-game slate is a little bit of a red flag. Smitch 926. Near the end of the show, can you guys rank the guys from 9K to 7K? No, we're not going to do that because we don't have 3 hours. But we will talk about our best plays at the end of the show. Team CJR says Shengun, excuse me, smashes every night. Every center is smashed against Dallas this year, except Gobert, which, that's Rudy Gobert. Travis, you plugged in your Starlink. Talk to us about the Mavericks, not the Mavericks, the Spurs and the Jazz.
Yeah, JT, understand. It's important to not take yourself too seriously in life sometimes, right? And Greg Popovich doesn't take his team seriously, right? He doesn't play Wemby enough. It's just brutal watching these guys. I'll just say this, DC. We talked last show with you, and we tried to talk you off the ledge of playing 4 Spurs. You're not playing 4 Spurs today, are you, DC?
I didn't play 4 Spurs.
I don't know. We talked.
I listen. I'm more than willing to play 4 from the same team, but I have not played 4 Spurs this year. Listen, the Hawks.
You were more excited to play Spurs than a sane, sober person should be on that show. You were very bullish on them.
Yeah.
You're very bullish on them.
Well, I deny the charges of playing 4 Spurs. I categorically deny. I'll pull up the teams here. And
I do think you said you wanted at least like 3 in every team.
Fake news, JT. Fake news.
We're gonna lose our license. Travis, talk to us about the Spurs and the Jazz.
Yeah. So this Spurs team, I agree with DC on one thing. I think Socan's good chalk. Like, I really do. Yeah. I've been on him most of the year. He's been pretty solid. The problem that I will say is not 4'6" anymore. He's 5'8". Is my internet better now? This is brutal.
I don't know. I don't know what you're saying. You just said agree with DC, so I muted you for a second. Go on.
All right, well, hopefully it clears up. I don't know why it's back and forth, but I might have to leave at this point. That's how bad it's been. But I do think Socan is a good play despite being 5.8K. I'm not excited about Chris Paul. I don't see myself getting there with Chris Paul. What were you going to say, JT?
Are you concerned at all? Yeah, I mean the ownership here, it's a 4-game slate, right? And I'm seeing 63% own Jeremy Sochan. It just screams. It screams a spot that he's going to wreck your lineups. Like, go out there and with the first possession, throw the basketball in the ref's face, do something to get it. I mean, it's just something you just see that with these 60% owned terrible plays. But go on.
Yeah, my internet doesn't look like it's going great, so hopefully we're okay there. But this is brutal. It's an absolute mess. But I like Socan. Maybe this is a sign we shouldn't play him though, JT. I do think Julian Champagne. We should talk about him a little bit, being 5% up.
I hate this fucking team. Go on. Yes, Julian Champagne.
He's 5% though.
We have to talk about him. You're right. You're right.
You do. You have to discuss him. He's 5%. I do think he's a really interesting pivot off of Socan if you want one. I don't love Wemby as a spend that much today. I think he's fine, but it's, again, there's other spends that I prefer, some that we've talked about, some that we're going to get to. Lauri Markkanen at 7.8. I know he's someone that's got that questionable tag. I'm not excited to play him anyways. For me, I will search for some value plays here. And I do think the Jazz have values that we should consider. They have ceilings, right? Like Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, all these guys have ceilings. So I want to pay attention to that starting lineup, but also when I run my MME stuff, which is going to be super important when I run everything, I want to make sure I'm not like, I don't need to have like 80% of a Jazz play, right? Like these are the guys that kind of just like cap your ownership at and call it a day. I know it's like not like the greatest take on the planet, but the point I'm getting at is this is not a game you want to kill you. You don't want to be like, well, I had a ton of Colin Sexton and then he absolutely buries your lineups. Like these are just risky plays. You have to understand that the minutes aren't that safe. Keontae George is another guard now that's in the mix that's gained a little bit more like experience with that team. So now he can steal some of those minutes. These guys are all in play at their price tags. They have good ceilings, but you just have to be careful.
Remember last year, everyone was saying Keontae George was the guy. Keontae George is the guy. So there's a chance there. You're right. Go on.
No, he's a good play. And like I said, I don't like Lauri. He's just too expensive. And I know he's got the questionable tag and everything. I want to see these like 5K guys. I don't even want to dig into the values like the Patty, Kyle Filipowski's. It's mainly like the guys that we know are like real basketball players like Keontae George, Jordan Clarkson, stick to those guys because they have ceilings if they get the appropriate minutes in a matchup against the Spurs.
All right. We will move on and go to the fourth game of the night, the last game of the night, incredibly. We're breezing through this slate, so if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Travis, we'll stay with you. The Phoenix Suns heading into Los Angeles, play the Clippers here. The Suns are 4.5-point favorites, 221 total. I think this is another one, Travis, where AP likes the under here, the under 221, or one of the two that he was on. He says he said he wasn't happy about it, but he liked it. He thought this was the play. What are your thoughts here? It looks like Devin Booker is, for me at least, showing as someone who may be a pretty good, not quite fully, but somewhat contrarian play. What are your thoughts here in this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, Devin Booker definitely is a bad player. I know what his season can be. He's way less the ownership than someone like James Harden, to be honest. Oh, gosh, my internet's cutting out, isn't it? Is my internet good, JT?
It's spotty. It's good now.
The point I want to get to is I like James Harden. James Harden's a really strong play for me, someone that I really like in this spot. I like Zubac too at 6.5K. I think he'll be able to dominate Nurkic on the other end. Another argument you can make for Nurkic being a really good tournament play is Saberson showing him at 3% owned. The Clippers are going to use a big man. It's a really good spot for a low-owned Nurkic in this spot. So he's another guy that I think is a really strong play. And then I don't mind Kevin Durant at 8.6K as a spend. I should mention Norman Powell and his usage. He's clearly the number 2 guy in this team. And to be able to get the number 2 guy at 5.6K or play Chris Paul or the Jazz options, like just give me Norman Powell instead. So I think he's a really strong value on this slate. And starting lineups could be important for this game a little bit. You could see them maybe mix it up, but that we got to see what's going to happen with the Bradley Beal stuff and go from there.
DC Zubac is another guy that's showing some pretty high ownership. I don't know if he's going to come in at the 70% that he's projected in some places, 65%, something like that. Travis mentioned Nurkic going to be 3%. I have Şengün showing somewhere in the neighborhood of under 5% ownership, which is, I think, pretty wild. So I do think there's ways to get off of these popular plays if you're not feeling that this is the best place to play them. But what about James Harden? What about Devin Booker? What about these centers and the Suns and the Clips?
Yeah, it should be a fun game here. Clippers, obviously a little bit short-handed, especially at the big position, missing PJ Tucker, missing Mo Bamba. I know he doesn't play center. Kawhi Leonard also out for this game. And it's led to a ton of minutes for Zubac because they don't really have a backup, right? Their backup is Kai Jones, and it seems like Zubac his entire career has been kind of like a good point per minute producer, point per dollar producer as well sometimes. But like the minutes, you just never know if they're going to be there for Zubac. Right now, I mean, in competitive games, they kind of almost have to be. I know he only played 31 last night in the loss to Portland. Prior to that, though, 38, 39 minutes, 34 minutes in the opener, and put up some, 250-plus fantasy point games, put up 60 against Golden State. And one thing I've had success early on this season is I think there's more correlation between, on at least some of these teams, not on every team, but on some of these teams, the starters, where if the game is close or they're playing well, they're all going to get the minutes together. And I think the Clippers are kind of that team tonight where, listen, if this game, if it just played out exactly like the team told, Clippers lose the game by 3 or 4 points and it goes to 220, I think all of Harden, Powell, Derek Jones Jr., and Zubac are going to be out there like 35-plus minutes each. And I think all 4 of them can get there together and also fail together, right? So I actually like putting 3 or, frankly, I'm fine with 4 of those guys together. And we've seen in competitive games, especially on a 4-game slate, if, it happens all the time. 2 of these games blow out and you go to the one game that you kind of need. I could see that being the case for the Clippers. So they probably are my favorite team overall, but kind of want to play these starters together. Obviously, Zubac leading the way, but I think Harden is a fine spend, especially if you're going more of kind of a mid-range game. Norman Powell, he's playing awesome this year. The minutes are there every single night, still 5,600. Think he's a fantastic play. And even Derek Jones Jr. at 4,400, he's averaging 31 minutes a game. Again, maybe not the highest upside guy, but we're a little bit starved for value. And I think he's got a good shot at 25 plus fantasy points. I think his defense is going to be needed on the likes of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker tonight. So I like Derek Jones Jr. as well. High on the Clippers. Sun side, obviously, a ton depends on Bradley Beal, who I kind of expect him to play this game, but you never know for sure, especially with Bradley Beal. If he's out, Booker, Tyus Jones, and Kevin Durant, I think all get significant bumps. Don't hate the call on Nurkic if you're looking to get a little bit contrarian at center as well. Really good game here, I think, to close out the slate, especially if Bradley Beal ends up sitting out.
All right. Andrew Martinez, Travis wants to know if Tyus Jones is too expensive tonight.
I wouldn't say he's too expensive. I mean, the one issue you have with Tyus Jones, and this is something you have to be careful about with certain guys, is he doesn't have, he has the ability to not close, right? They could easily pull him off the court depending on the lineup. That's the worry that I would have when kind of looking to roster Tyus Jones. But he is a good tournament play at his price tag. So definitely not a bad play.
Okay. We are going to get to the plays of the day. Travis, your internet was working there. So we'll go ahead and start with you for the sweet Travis play of the day.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet before CenturyLink decides to cut out. We'll go with Derek Lively. I talked about how he's off the bench and just in a really good role, going to be lower owned than Daniel Gafford than he should be. So give me Derek Lively as my play of the day.
Derek Lively, DC, is sweet Travis's play of the day on this Halloween. What is your play of the day?
Love the Lively call. I will go with Storm and Norman Powell. Going to put up another big game tonight, 5,600 in that mid-range. And, man, look at this guy's shot attempts, 22, 15, 21, 16. I actually think he's kind of running bad in the peripheral stats so far and still putting up, 35.6 fantasy points per game on the young season. I think he has another big one tonight. Norman Powell, the DC player of the day.
Norman Powell, Derek Lively. Are we liking Taurean Prince at that 4K? Not for me.
No.
Not going to. Much more interested in Derek Jones that DC mentioned. Much more interested in maybe coming down off of one of the spends. But one guy that I'm not going to come down on here on this slate at under 5% ownership in a really, really good matchup. And I think they're going to need his scoring. I think they're going to need his rebounding. And I think they're going to get it tonight. Alperen Şengün is the Eiffel Tower play of the day on this Halloween. If you have friends and you're out trick-or-treating, maybe go find yourselves an Eiffel Tower. We'll be back next Thursday for the NBA Hardwood show. There's football. The Jets are on, which is okay. But then there's NBA. There is no more baseball. The Dodgers, the world champions of 2024. We will see you guys. And go ahead, get in the Discord. Core plays will be going up. Player pools will be going up. There will be bets. There will be singing, VIP, Vippin. Had a nice night last night with the prize picks. So go ahead, get in there, do all that. Good luck in your contests tonight. For Travis, for DC, I'm JT Hayes. Ride the snake.
And you shouldn't be afraid to ride the snake.
Ride the snake.